Thank you for having me, my friend, because I got into Bitcoin when I was 18. And so I grew up in this industry and watching guys like yourself. And so when you became a Bitcoiner and started to join us, it was the coolest thing in the world. And the fact that I'm on your show is even cooler. So I appreciate you. Um, I got into Bitcoin, it was 12 years ago at this point, from my father. So you mentioned my grandfather, but I probably have a rare story in that my dad orange pilled me. He got me into Bitcoin. A lot of the Chicago finance scene over a decade ago was building a Bitcoin position. I think Chicago finance is very different than New York finance when it comes to culture, products, experiences. The CME and the exchange here versus maybe the NYSE in New York, very different. And Bitcoin, for whatever reason, resonated with this crowd. And so I was dropping out of college right when my dad started to build a position. And he was like, before I waste any more money on another failed tuition, why don't you check this Bitcoin thing out with me? And that was my entry into it, like I said, about 12 years ago. To be a superior asset for you to hold. We can spend hours on this podcast talking about how and why that is. I think simply put, it's because it's the hardest asset you can hold relative to things like Swift and Western Union. And these were the type of services that I didn't see anyone working on. People were focused on all these other coins and leverage, and that's great, and they're good businesses. But I thought Latin America needs these products. Emerging markets need these products. Cross-currency payments can unlock a lot of GDP growth. So there was a small community in El Salvador that was kind of tinkering with Bitcoin. And so I bought a one-way flight it was either January or February of 2021. And I said, I'm going to figure this out. And so I went down there and we set up a cross-border payment channel between the United States and El Salvador. And El Salvador made a lot of sense because it was a very violent country. A lot of migrants come into America, into the southern of America, that work low-paying wages and jobs to send money home. There's a lot of gang violence, and it was ripe for technology to help out and deliver more of the value back to the consumer. And so we launched that product. And it went so well that one night I got a DM from the president's brother. And it was very long. But effectively, what it said is, we want to meet community shillings. And so the fact that you have an asset that on average over the last 10 years is 63% annualized return. So it's the fastest growing thing that any of us could have owned. I mean, it's accessible to everybody. So it is a life raft in that sense. And whether you're a country and you are in debt, listen, we talk about these metrics like debt to GDP. How much have you borrowed versus how much growth are you producing to pay that back? We're all looking for growth. And you could buy growth off the shelf. All 8 billion of us is a way to think about it as a government. If you're interested in growth, if you're interested in productivity, you could say, I'll take a burger, small fry, a Coke Zero, and 63% year over year growth over the last decade. That's not a bad deal. That's not a bad lunch order. And so for the individual and the family, it's very similar and the same. You know, for El Salvador as well, these people don't have access to Google engineers. They don't have access to minds like Michael Saylor. They don't have access to consumer innovative minds like Jack Dorsey. But being a part of Bitcoin, they did. They were benefiting from the work of MIT professors, from Michael Saylor, from Google engineers, from Jack Dorsey, from the world's work on an open distributed network. So you're joining a global team of the smartest minds and the most powerful computing network in the world. And situation is a problem. Our new administration thinks it's a problem. Every economist on CNBC thinks it's a problem. It's officially alert, danger. This can't last. Jamie Dimon. This is the first time I've agreed with Jamie Dimon on pretty much anything. So I think the problem is we have too much debt. And the way I would say it is that someone has to realize the loss, right? Domestic debt to GDP, close to 130%. Global debt to GDP, well over 300%. And so there's a loss that has to be realized. And the question is, where are we going to realize that loss? You know, are we going to render all bondholders poor? Probably not. My expectation is further currency debasement. My expectation is further asset inflation. And my expectation is Bitcoin will continue to be the best performer because it's the scarcest and the hardest to make more of. In fact, it's the only thing you can't make any more of it. So the 250 to a million range it's a crazy buffer for me to say out loud. But the reality is, if America comes out and buys 4 million Bitcoin, I think Bitcoin ticks a million easily. If not, Bitcoin performs better as a money and performs better as a store of value and performs better in percentage terms and in real terms against the dollar or whatever your unit of measurement is. So I think it's a combination of both. And I think this is a good opportunity to walk the users through, what is money and its intended purpose in a marketplace. So money is a market good, just like anything else, just like a cheeseburger or a car or a plane. But the difference is I acquire a cheeseburger to consume it and eat it. I acquire a car to consume it and move me on the road. I acquire a plane to consume it and fly me somewhere. I acquire money uniquely not to consume it. It's the one market good that I don't consume. I'm acquiring the money to save and exchange it later for the things I need. And so money performs that job as a technology. So when people say money is whatever we think it should be, like what we can make water bottles money if we want to. It's like, no, but you can't make a water bottle an airplane if you want to. If you get on a water bottle and jump off, you need to teleport all over the world that you can validate from a cheap hardware device in your home. So I would say it's not a competitor at all. And in fact, it's just the same dollar that we've had or fiat currencies we've had dressed up in a new outfit.
Let's go to another question. What are the most common misconceptions traditional and older investors have about Bitcoin, and how can they be addressed? This is Joshua from Missouri.
That's a great question. I think things like security is one that comes to mind. Don't mistaken the collapse of a company or an exchange for an issue with Bitcoin and the money and the protocol itself. I think the other is volatility. I think people fear volatility. And unfortunately, Anthony, I think we live in a world where central parties and governments and central banks have really tried to strip the volatility away from us and take it out of our lives. And we think of no volatility as take an aggressive answer to this. I would say, now I can't speak to other cryptos. For everyone listening, I own 3 things in my life. I actually don't own any dollars at all. I only own Bitcoin. I own my house. I own my company. That's how I live my life. So I can only speak to those. So I'll speak to Bitcoin. I would say this is the only asset you can own with no risk in the sense of counterparty risk. I don't want to excuse the volatility, and I don't want to set unrealistic expectations. It can be volatile, but risk meaning I'm not trusting anyone else. There's no corporate CEO that can fail a product launch. There's no board member that can get hit by a bus and get in a disaster. There's no government that can change the regulatory this and that. Like, I own it physically bare. It's mine. I have no counterparty risk. And so to me, it's actually the least risky thing I own. For my house, I have property taxes. I have an HOA. There's a building and a staff. What if there's a natural disaster here and more than I believed in me that saw me through the other side? So value your company.
No more questions. My friend, I promised I was going to get you out of here on time. All right. I just want to say thank you to the legendary Jack Mallers. Any year-end ideas for people, Jack? Right? It's hard. Some people say, no, it's $100,000. Don't buy it. It's going to correct back to 60, blah, blah, blah. What do you say? Get off zero? What do you say, sir?
Yeah, I'll go on a quick rant to end this. Listen, I think thinking you're late to Bitcoin is a failure of your ego. I really do, because it's late to who? Mm-hmm. And you realize, oh, you're comparing yourself to Anthony. You're comparing yourself to your friend, to your colleague, to this person you don't know on the internet. And to me, that's a failure of your ego. That's vulnerable insecurities getting the best of your best interest.